Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, and Holy Spirit, we thank you for another day that's filled with sunshine and all sorts of possibilities for greatness and magnificence and goodness. We ask you in this early morning at the beginning of this wonderful day at camp that you'll give us that adjustment to all the heavenlies once more, so that we will be sensitive to and vibrate to all of the attributes of the nature of heaven this day, and that we'll be insensitive and dumb and deaf and blind to everything that is not of the kingdom of perfection in every way. So you take this whole day and take all that we are, and in your own way put it together right, the way it was in the beginning and the way it shall be. Only make it now. In Jesus' name, amen. There's a story of a man that had a mule, and they say that he entered this mule in the Kentucky Derby. And his friends came up to him and they said, Mose, what in the world is the idea of you entering your old mule in the Kentucky Derby there with all the kings of the turf and all that stuff? He said, what? You know that thing hasn't got a show. He says, no, but the company will do him good. So you just look around you, and no matter how sour your neighbor looks, the company will do you good. And they'll look a lot better by the end of this week. Even the piano player will. One of the things that we have to talk about, which I think is one of the most important discoveries that I've made, is this: that you see what you've trained yourself to see, in anybody or in anything. Seeing is not an objective process at all. It's a subjective one. And you can you can show some sort of action taking place on a stage. And it's been proven time after time in all sorts of experiments, and it is this: that you see what you have trained yourself to see, either for good or for ill. There is all of the possibilities in everybody. There's all the possibilities in everything for things which you can praise or things which you can damn, and they're both reality. They're both real. The only thing is, you go into a city, say, and there are all sorts of places in that city where you can eat. The choice is yours. You can say, well, I'm going to be a realist, and I'm going to find the dirtiest restaurant I can find. I'm going to find the place to eat which will give me ptomaine poisoning. I'm going to find the place to eat where the waiters come out and their aprons are filthy. I'm going to be a realist. But you can be just as much a realist if you choose to eat in the place where everything's beautiful and clean and fine and uplifting and inspiring. That's just as much reality also. There was a time in Exodus, I believe, when God was speaking to Moses in order to speak to the children of Israel, and he said, "This day I place before you a blessing and a curse. This day I place before you happiness and sadness. This day I place before you health and disease. This day I place before you beauty and ugliness. And which one you choose is entirely up to you." But this idea of seeing is one of the most important things that I know of, and it's about the strongest method of prayer that I know of also. For what you see determines or is either determines or is determined by the kind of a thing that you have sensitized yourself to on the inside. And there's a story in the 13th chapter of Genesis here about Abraham and Lot. Abram, as you remember, was the uncle of Lot, and they came out of Egypt, and they were both rich. They went into the land of Canaan, and as they both had much cattle and everything else, why there just wasn't enough pasture land for everybody. And their herdsmen started to fight with each other. And Abram, who was older, and here is the thing, you can read in these old stories, truth is truth. And it is not a matter that the onrush of history was that everybody came up to a higher level of understanding at the same time. But you can have people living in savagery, say, and yet there might be one or two members of that nation or of that tribe who will have a sensitive spirit to the things of God and to the things of love and to the things of justice and mercy and all those things. So you'll find out many of the things that happen in these old stories in the Old Testament are reflected and are reiterated in the Gospels and in the teaching of Jesus. And you'll find this thing here. So their herdsmen were fighting for land and for pasture land and for water. And Abram went up to his nephew and he said, we are of the same family. Let's not fight. You lift up your eyes now and you look to the east and look to the north and look to the south and west. And anything that you want, that's what you can have. That's actually placing yourself at somebody else's mercy. But when you go over the story of Abram, you can see that he had reason to believe that it was not the things of his eyes, not the things he could see, touch, smell, which looked after him all these years. But in some way or other, there was an interior leading, there was an interior light. There was an invisible something or other that looked after him no matter what the outer circumstances of his life were. And so rather than looking out and immediately feeling tense and frustrated and afraid and saying, I've got to go out and fight for my own, he said, no, I've had too much experience in living. I've had too much experience in life to go back to being a savage. So now, look, you're still young. You lift up your eyes and you take whatever you want, and whatever you want, I'll take what is left over. And Lot lifted up his eyes and he looked toward the river Jordan, and he saw there that the place was well watered and that the grass was high, and he said, well, this is the place for me. I'm going to take all of that, which of course left Abram with only the mountains and the mountain slopes where things were not nearly as good. And I think that's just about that's a reflection of the universal truth which Jesus spoke also when he said, make friends with thine enemy whilst thou art in the way with them. Don't stand up and fight. Somehow or other, if your life and if all that you are is really dependent upon God, why you don't have to get up and fight in that way. But anyway, after this whole thing's over, Abram's to be blunt about it, is in a tough spot. He's got herds also. How will they live? Now that this individual, since he took on Lot after Lot's father died, Abram had actually reared him. And this young fellow has actually turned his back on him. He has actually bitten the hand that fed him. And Abram had all the right in the world to be angry, to be unforgiving, to be mad, to really seethe on the inside. But the kind of peace and the kind of sense of destiny that Abram had on the inside was not dependent upon outer circumstances. In him, too, This universal truth that Jesus spoke of, that the kingdom of heaven is within you. It is not without you. Therefore, you don't have anything to worry about if you continue to trust and have the right attitudes, those right attitudes. That right sensitivity within you will draw these things to you that you need, no matter who you are. And so, but anyway, he's left there, and he's in a spot. And he walked off by himself and got still. He didn't start moaning. But he went off and he immediately fastened the eyes of his spirit. This single eye that is on the inside upon God, and in the stillness, God reveals something to him. Maybe not, and I would almost say undoubtedly not in an audible voice, but in this interior thinking, this interior realization on the inside. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. And Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and there built an altar unto the Lord. So the big question in your mind is, what did Abram see? I mean, it would all depend upon what you saw. For he said, whatever you see, that's what I will give to you. And I'm sure of this much, that if Abram had lifted up his eyes and had saw what so many other people in his same place would have seen, that everything was taken, that everything was gone, that everything belonged to everybody else, that if he had lifted up his eyes and saw that nothing was left for him, if he had lifted up his eyes and saw, as far as he was concerned, poverty and old age that was filled with destitution, according to the universal law of God, that's just exactly what he would have gotten also. In other words, this is a two-edged sword. He says, I'll give you whatever you see. And therefore, it is mighty important to be careful what you see. And it's a mighty important thing to train your eyes to see the things that you want. An individual who goes out who becomes a salesman, say, he goes out there. Now, all of the people in that area have been buying their material from somebody else. They haven't been just sitting there waiting for him. Somebody has been supplying whatever their needs are. So if this new salesman goes into this area, into the territory, and sees, well, there isn't anything left. Everybody is buying from somebody else. All that there is here is all that I can see that there is for me here is poverty. All that there is here is the fact that I'll be unable to pay my bills at the end of this month. If that's all that he really sees in that thing, if he sees that everything's taken, which Abraham could have seen here, then that's all that he will get also. But how often? And what is the law? What is one of the universal laws of individuals who have succeeded in salesmanship? They go into a place which all of it has been, all of the good accounts, say, all of the plain country there, all of the lush contracts are already taken up by somebody else. They just haven't been sitting there praying, hoping, waiting that at someday or other you would show up. They're living, they're being born, and they're dying, and they're doing all of the things in life that everybody is supposed to do long before you show up. But the salesman who goes in there, who makes a success out of it, has eyes that see something else. There's a man in Minneapolis whom I've met, and they say that in the days of the Depression, that this man for a long time didn't even have enough money to sole his shoes, literally, and so he bought cardboards and he stuck them in there. He lived about 6 miles from the heart of the city. He was an insurance man, and he had to walk into the city, snow or ice or anything else. But somebody once asked him what the secret of his success was, and he's got money, lots of it now, just plain lots of it. He's abundant in about every way. And he said that in those days of the Depression, and here's the thing, if you don't do it then, there is no sense of doing it when hoping for the time that you will give thanks when you have got it. You've got to start where you are when you've got nothing, and start practicing this thing then. It's like you have got to, it means nothing to make a statement of faith. It means nothing to smile. It means nothing to believe in others. When things are going well, when they're upright, moral, and all of these other things, any fool can do that. It takes no faith whatsoever. But where your faith really comes to the fore is when everything goes wrong. When there is death, when there is poverty, when somebody goes off the beam and gets drunk, say. When somebody whom you had great hopes for suddenly goes wrong, there's the time when that person needs somebody to believe in him. There's the time when that person needs somebody to stand beside him and put his arm around him and give him strength. That's the time when your faith shows. And so this man, when he had nothing, or when he had so close to nothing that it didn't make any difference, he said that he used to sit before a table, and he would put a dollar bill on that, and he would look at it, and he would look at it, and he would close his eyes, and he would see that dollar bill become two and grow into a pile and get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, you see dollar bills just floating to him from the northeast, southwest, everything else. When he had nothing, now you would say, "Why, he's crazy. He's just daydreaming," but he wasn't. He was seeing something, and this idea, I can say this, that I have said a lot of things in my past in prayer which sounded good and which absolutely meant nothing. But I can also say this, that the things that I have dreamed about, the things that I have daydreamed about, the things that I have gone off by myself and wondered about and saw myself doing, all of those things, as far as I know, or there is hardly anything which I cannot think of, but most of those things have happened, or almost all of them have. Against, and here is a paradox. Against my better judgment, against my beliefs even. For I never thought that so many things that have happened to me would ever happen. If anybody had have asked me, I would have said with my lips, and I would have meant it. Oh, shoot, that's where I would love to do that. I would love to have done that. But it'll never happen to me. I just haven't got it, either the money or the talent or the contacts or this or that, and simply because of the fact that I've stuttered ever since I was a child, I thought that in some way or other it would be just my ideal once was, boy, if I could ever get a job in the post office where they couldn't fire me now. If I could ever be assured of $150 a month, and boy, in the magazines and in the newspapers way back in the 30s there, in the early 30s, why, boy, $150 a month, I mean, you just plain had it made. And furthermore, if that $150 a month was guaranteed by the government, why, shoot, what more could anybody want? And I thought, boy, if that could ever happen to me, if through some pull, if through bribing the devil himself or anybody else, if I could ever get that, now I'd really have this thing made. But I was an inveterate dreamer. I used to see myself, oh boy, in the most amazing places that you ever saw. Successful, happy, oh, just imagine it. And this much I can say is that, and this is why I believe that seeing is the strongest form of prayer. The first time that Jesus met Peter, he looked at him, and I was very interested to, it was drawn to my attention once more, and it's in the first chapter of John. The first, Jesus saw things in people that they themselves or anybody else didn't see there. Now, if I can find it. Well, anyway, and anywho. Well, I can't find it here now, but I shall later on. But anyway, you go to the first chapter of the Gospel of John there, and you'll see that the first thing, Jesus looks at Peter and he says, "Thou art Simon, and thou shalt be Cephas," or Petras. First time he ever saw him, he said, "I see in you a rock." And he hardly even knew him. But Jesus started seeing things in people, and the kind of things that he saw in people was a pretty good window into the interior soul of Jesus. And you'll find other people, and I could name some of them, and the minute they see anybody, they always see some sort of fault in them, some sort of weakness in them, something in them that either the color of their eyes or the shape of their nose or whatever it is, they are always seeing the disastrous and the disaster and the weakness. And you know, there is an insight into this thing. Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. Now, there are all sorts of interpretations of that. And I think that in the particular context where he was speaking there, he was speaking about thou hypocrite. Everybody judges. Jesus himself judged. He said, look at the fruit of these people. That's judging. But he was speaking of judgment which was done for a utilitarian end. He was speaking of the psychological technique of projection. And so often when you judge, your judgment reveals more about you than it does about the other person. I know people that are always seeing the same thing in everybody, no matter where they are. There is a person whom I know, and it is a pattern which has gone over years and years, and which has resulted in disaster, both for himself and for his wife and for his kids. And he was always seeing something sexually wrong with everybody, no matter where he looked. And he was supposed to be, I don't know it. He was with some group that called themselves prophets. And so no matter who he looked at, young, old, small, white, black, rich, poor, didn't make any difference. Something was always wrong with them. There was something wrong with their relationship with the opposite sex. Now look, that reveals more about him, for what this person is and sees and has sensitized himself to it on the inside. It's like holding up a piece of tinted glass before your eyes. No matter where you look, everything's pink. No matter where you look, everything, you can hold up this glass of whatever the glass is. You can hold up the glass of poverty. And wherever you look, doesn't matter where it is, you could be living in the greatest abundance of heaven, but you've got this thing stuck before your eyes. Only this isn't before the outer eyes here. It's on the inside of your mind, and all you can see is poverty, 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 poverty. Wherever you go. And you can look at somebody else, and on the inside of their mind, they've got a piece of tinted glass that is fear and inferiority. And wherever they look, no matter what the situation is, no matter where they are, they're afraid and they're filled with inferiority and tension and frustration. All that's on the inside here, for somebody else can go into just exactly the same situation, and they see everything pure and upright and good and abundant. Exactly the same room, exactly the same air, exactly the same time of day, wherever they are. What do you see? Boy, you better be careful what you see. You better be careful how you judge. For then, after a while, everybody says, "Oh, well, him." No matter where he is, everything is poor. Everything is poverty-stricken. And you see, you're being judged by the same judgment which you gave to somebody else, and say, "Well, him, shoot, he sees the same thing in everybody." Well, they say, "Well, boy, there must be something wrong with him. There must be something. He's seeing a bad home life for everybody that he meets." And they say, "Well, boy, you can be sure that there's something wrong with his own. And that's why he's seeing it in everybody else." So you see, with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. There's no ifs, ands in it. That's just a universal. This is the psychological law of projecting what you are on others. It's the old law of the woman gave me the apple to eat, see? The woman, she tempted me. And with all these women here, it just hurts my male ego to say it, but it's true. You go to the old Puritans of New England, and they saw things. The men saw things in the women of New England which objectively speaking was not true. And so you say, well, if certain emotions can be aroused in me, it can't be me, because I'm pure, I'm good, I'm up. It's got to be the woman. She's wrong. Therefore, she is a witch, or she's this, or she's that, or whatever else it is. But here's this old psychological thing of projection, which comes out once more. With what judgment you judge, you will be judged. There's no ifs, ands in it. And the sad thing about judgment is that it reveals more about you than anything else. And I think that there are symbolic meanings in these words also. Lift up your eyes. Look to the northward. Look to the southward. Look to the eastward. Look to the westward. And in a sense, there are some people that are looking to the north all the time. Everything's cold to them. Life is cold and destitute and barren. And there are some personalities, you know, they're always looking at the east. No matter where they are, the sun's always rising. Brother, just give me another chance and I'll have this thing made. And no matter how often they fail, it's just exactly the same way. A newspaper reporter asked Mike Todd. They said, there was a period in your life when you were poor. He said, "I have never been poor. There have been times when I was temporarily short of cash, but I've never been poor." Sun's always rising up there. And a person went up to Thomas Edison once, and they said, "Wasn't it just awful that you had to fail those, I don't know whether it was 1,200 or 1,600 times before you got the light bulb?" He said, "Madam, I have never failed. I just found out 1,600 ways that it didn't work." Attitude of mind, all on the inside. You know, there is one of the things which in a sense is good, but there's you can run a good thing into the ground no matter what it is. But one of the things that we ought to teach our kids in school is how to fail successfully. And that is the truth. For it so help me, there's nobody in this world that isn't going to well, I don't know whether you wish to use the word fail, but where things are not going to work out as you hope that they would. And you can fail without becoming a failure. You don't have to become a failure. And it's the individual who can, and you go into boxing, go into skating, go into baseball, go into anything at all. The champion falls down a lot of times. He gets hurt a lot of times. Oftentimes he will take just as big a beating as the other guy, but whereas the other guy stays there, the champion gets up and keeps on going. No matter what the champion is, whether it's selling boots or shoes or what have you, he keeps on going. And one of the sad things, one of the most awful things, and probably the greatest sin that we have is fear. And fear is oftentimes related to this thing of being afraid to try because you might fail. And yet you take almost anything, almost anybody in any line of work. I don't care what the line of work is, whether it's selling bricks or preaching from the pulpit. Everybody fails. But it's a guy that keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. And is not going to be a failure because he fails, but who keeps on. Where the sun is always rising in the east, he's looking eastward all the time. That is a wonderful person to be with. I've known people with inventions, and you think, well, gee whiz, how could he keep on going and trying all this failure? But they got their joy in the adventure. You want to know what happiness is? People, well, I'll get into that some other time. I've got to spread this stuff out a little bit here. And there are people that are looking to the southward all the time. Everything's warm. They aren't frigid. They're just loving and kind and throwing out their arms to everybody that comes. And somehow or other, life responds to them in just exactly that same way. There's a person whom I know out in North Carolina there. And she embarrasses the life out of me, but she was a dancer for many years, and she became an alcoholic, and she hit bottom in every possible way. And she had and she became a member of AA, and she was a member of AA for some years. And then she got to the point there where she was, well, she wasn't drinking, but she was on a dry drunk. I mean, she actually wasn't taking the bottle, but inwardly, in her mind, in her attitudes, in her emotions, she was, and life just came where it wasn't worth going on. And she went to prayer groups for years, and she didn't get it. She heard all of these other people talking about the presence of God and the presence of Jesus and this and that, and she went time after time. And if they got down on the floor and rolled, she got down on the floor and rolled. But for her, it didn't do any good, see. And she was going to an AA convention in Atlanta, and she got up to her hotel room, and suddenly all the frustration of the years took over, and boy, she started to tell God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit off in four-letter words that any fool could understand. She said she had been hearing all about this love, and all about this understanding, and all about this compassion, and all these things, but she hadn't seen it, and she was just sick and tired, blah, 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 of it, in words which I can't use here. And she said, she said, unless I get some actual evidence in my life of it, within 30 minutes, I'm going to get a bottle of liquor, and I'm going to drink it, and I'm going to jump out the window, and she meant it. And as she continued to rant and rave and so on, she became aware of somebody standing behind her, and she turned around her, and she said, Jesus, in visible form, was actually standing there. And she said that this body had substance. Literally, and they talked back and forth, and at the end, the one thing he said that you lack, which is you lack my joy, I give you my joy, and that joy just blasted out and shouted at her, and he entered her body. Well, she wasn't the most happy people constantly, day by day. Not only when there's people around her, and this is probably the greatest evidence to me of the indwelling presence of God than anything else, is a sense of joy, natural, spontaneous joy that isn't a put-up job. And she has it. And she is one of these people which looks southward all the time. She's warm and friendly, but there are times when I wonder if she just couldn't hold it down just a little bit. I was in a big church there, holding a mission in this big formal of all things Presbyterian church there. And she came in there, and the minute I saw her, I just wanted to crawl in a corner and hide, for I just had a pretty good idea as to what was coming up. And there's a time and a place for all things, and that wasn't it. Either the time or the place. She rushed up to me, and of course everybody turned around and looked. But that's the way she is. She's looking from the sun. She expects love and joy to, no matter whether the person looks good, clean, pure, upright, holy, or just exactly all of the opposite. In everybody and in everything, she's just flowing out in love. She's a southward-looking personality all the time, warm and joy, and life responds to her in just that same way. And then there are people that look to the westward all the time. Sun's always sinking. Just plain this. Doesn't matter what it is. Well, so what does God say? Now he says, arise and walk through the land, the length of it, and the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. In other words, just don't say it with your lips. I remember that Genevieve Parkhurst once said that in talking about somebody that came to her for prayer and for healing, and she had her close her eyes, and she says, try to remember sometime when you were a little girl, and you used to live by the river, and how you used to walk barefooted, and how you used to, on those hot days, you would put your feet into the stream. And she said, now recapture that feeling. Feel your foot going into that stream. Feel all the sensations going up your leg and into your body. And lie down and feel your heart pound with excitement the way it used to do there. Well, I mean, it's things like that which we mean is walk the length and the breadth of it. Take this dream, see it with the eyes of your mind, and then just in your emotions. And with your sense of smell and hearing and touch and everything else, rut through it just like an old hog and just love every minute of it. Wallow in it. And he says, if you do that, it will come to you. I've got a friend out in Hollywood, whom you all know. You can see him on television almost every week. And he said that he has been an inveterate dreamer all of his life. And he said he got out of acting school in New York City. And he said he got these small bit parts on the stage there. And he said, but the star of his day was Joan Crawford. And he said, of course, she was just plain it. And he said he used to go to bed night after night, and he said in bed he used to play the most delightful love scenes with Joan Crawford that you ever saw. And he said always there was the chase. But always, he said, in the end, he won her. And he said the audience would roar and clap and do everything else, and he said he would just go off to sleep with playing these scenes with Joan Crawford and seeing the audience and feeling the thrill of it and getting all excited over it. And he said in those days he was a nobody. So he said years and years went by, and he showed up in Hollywood with probably thousands upon thousands of other actors, where actors are a dime a dozen. And he went to see this friend of his whom he had known years and years before. And this friend picked up the phone and, of all things, called Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was a name there. She had contacts with everybody else. And this friend told her all about him And she picked up the phone and she called a studio and asked them to do her a special favor. Would they please give this person a screen test? And because it was Joan Crawford that had called up, they said yes. And he got the test, and he's been in movies and everything since. And he says this: I found out in my life that if I dream about something long enough, not just plain think about it, but dream into it, and dream into it with my emotions, and with my will, and with my hearing, and with my lips, and with the feeling of my hands and my body, all through that, he says it has come true. What do you see? Some people can see those kind of things happening to them, and some people also have trained themselves, and this is just a matter of habit, trained themselves to see themselves that whenever they open their mouth, they stick their foot in it. That no matter what they do, that no matter what endeavor they go into, they see themselves that something is bound to go wrong. Well, shoot, in anything, something's bound to go wrong. But are you going to keep your eyes on the things that are bound to go wrong? Or are you going to go beyond the things which go wrong and see the end result of it, the thing that is happy, full, successful, and all those other things? This is the things that matter. I've seen people get up out of a deathbed by seeing themselves right. And there are all sorts of little techniques you can use. There was a woman down in North Carolina was on her deathbed with cancer, and she was all bloated out and everything else, and we got her to take the promises out of the Bible and substitute her name in them. We got her to take all of the photographs out of the photograph album there, where she looks happy, well, riding a bicycle, riding a car, swimming, but happy and with the kind of a body, which she should have now. And get these up, and they had them pinned onto her bed and onto the table beside her and everything else, and we had her go through magazines, the Saturday Evening Post, and anything at all, and to tear out pictures or cartoons or anything that witnessed with her as to strength, radiance, joy, hope, faith, beauty, fulfillment, outflowingness, attractiveness in all forms. And they got them stuck up all over the walls of the bedroom and everything. Wherever, if she just opened her eyes at all, there was always something there to look at that symbolized this thing for her. And as I say, there are x-rays and everything else to prove it, and she couldn't move when we first saw her, and 3 days later she walked into a big meeting. And as far as I know, she's still alive, and that's years and years ago. Now that's literally true. There are these things called a treasure map. Well, you can call it whatever you want, but all it is a technique to enable you to see the thing, to literally see the thing that you want. And it goes under many names, and there are many methods of doing it also. But one of the methods is to have either a sheet of paper or some board there, and you stick up on it. Say you for example want an automobile, a certain kind of an automobile, a certain color, and all that stuff. Well, you tear this ad out of the magazine and you stick it up there, and you stand before that morning and evening, and you look into it, and you look at that car, and you dream into that car, and you can feel the ignition keys in your hand, and you can feel yourself reaching out and taking hold of the handle of that door and opening it, and find yourself sliding over that seat, and you can actually feel yourself sticking the ignition keys into the ignition, starting it and going off, and just dream into that picture that this is your car. Well, you say, well, that's crazy. Is it? Try it and see. Just try it and see. And if it's poised, if it's a confident attitude toward life, well, there are all sorts of cartoons, or all sorts of pictures that you can pick out and stick up there. Maybe it's some ad for a salesman, and he's got his chest stuck away out there, and he's got his hand on the button, and got a big smile from ear to ear. Well, you can stick that up there and say, that's the way I want to be. And just look at it and see yourself in that way. the things that you want. Is it health? Glenn Cunningham, one of the the foremost miler of his day, was burned so badly as a kid as a school kid in Nebraska that it was doubtful whether he would ever walk again. But one thing he wanted more than anything else was to run. And so in his bedroom they stuck up pictures of men running, wherever he looked. Men were just running. And this little kid that was hardly supposed to be able to walk, for the rest of his life, became the outstanding mile runner of his day. This idea of seeing. What do you see? For Pete's sake, see the right thing. See the blessing. See the heavenly. See things breaking your way. See the things of beauty and poise and stableness and temperance. And temperance to me is balance. Temperance is not abstinence in anything, but temperance is balance. It's enough of everything in its right place at the right time and in the right way. It's just enough emotion, it's just enough intellect. It's just enough action, it's just enough passivity. It's just everything in its right place at the right time, just like the solar system is. You can predict that everything is just balanced just perfectly. And you could predict to the very second miles and years and years away in space where everything will be. And if you met every situation with perfect balance at just the right time, your life would be heavenly. And you take all of your dreams come true. Do you see all of your dreams come true? Jesus was a dreamer. If anybody in this world was a dreamer, we'll get into that. But be careful of the things that you dream. Dream fulfillment. Dream heaven. Dream happiness. Dream service. Dream the things that make for radiance and strength in every way. Be careful what you see. Now, you ought to begin to dream now. You ought to go dream about going outside here, and dream about going into rhythms. And like this, like the prodigal son, you know, he says, I will arise and go to my father. But it didn't end there. And it says, and he arose and he went. So after you dream, get up and go. So dream into this rhythm of releasing your body, of making your body radio-like, of making your body the real temple of God, an instrument fit and worthy to draw in all of the sensitivities of heaven and to propel you to all the fulfillments of heaven. And that's what your body is supposed to be. So let's, after dreaming now, just let's get up and go outside right through this door now. Thank you.